NIL and the transfer portal are a wild, wild west that's out of control, and the Cyclones are feeling the impact of that. What can be done to fix this situation? We're talking about it today on Locked On Cyclones.
You are Locked On Cyclones, your daily podcast on the Iowa State Cyclones, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into Locked On Cyclones, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Shout out to you for being here every single day, making this your first watch or listen of the day. I appreciate it more than you know. Wherever you're watching or listening, be sure to subscribe so we can prove once and for all that it is, in fact, a Cyclone State. Very special episode today. Christian Rao and I break down what's going on with the transfer portal in basketball, especially as that is kind of the most recent news. Then we talk about some legislation that's going to be passed and what's going on with really the whole NIL situation. Obviously, transfer portal kind of tied into that. And then finally, we round things out with a former Cyclone looking to go NFL. It's going to be a great one. I can't wait to dive into all that and more. But first, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, let's just dive into the madness that is the transfer portal.
Christian Rao, Locked On Kansas State, Nick Maravitz, Locked On Cyclones, doing a crossover today because we're digging into some, I guess we can say, problems when it is just across all of college athletics, the NCAA, you name it. There's a couple interesting topics that we wanted to break down. And to wrap it all up, there's also maybe a fun lightning one to end it here. So, Nick, I'm glad that we're joining forces yet again, the superpowers, if you will, of Farmageddon. And I'm excited to dig into this. And let's just do that. Let's get right into the meat and potatoes in this one. And I know you are well informed about what's going on with Iowa State in the transfer portal. If you haven't seen for Kansas State side, at least as of right now of this recording, not a single player has left the transfer portal. Not one for Kansas State. And the window did not open for this program the window didn't open for the program or any program until Kansas State season was actually over. However, I still have this mentality that maybe we need to take a deeper look into the transfer portal because the transfer portal opened up in the middle of March Madness. And as you can tell, I'm a little bit energetic about this. I feel like I have a good side. But I'm going to warn you I'm going to get your take first, but before I'm going to warn you, I have thoughts on both sides of this fight.
Oh,
I want to hear what you think. I do. And I have a couple things to back it up. But before we do that, what's your thoughts about the transfer portal opening right now in the middle of March Madness? I know we're getting to the Final Four. So for the record, we've already seen a team that was actively still in the tournament. There was a player on Michigan. Michigan was eliminated by Auburn. But before Michigan was eliminated, when they were playing, there was a player that entered the transfer portal. We've also seen this in the college football playoffs as well. There was a backup quarterback for Penn State, I believe, that entered the portal during the college football playoffs. When there's the actual game with basketball, there's so many different postseason tourneys. But obviously the dance is the big one. Mm-hmm. When people are leaving for the portal, when those teams are still in the ultimate goal, heading for the ultimate goal, I think that's where there's a problem. What do you think?
I just want to know who signed off on that idea. Who threw out that date, and then did they just not check and see when March Madness was? Like, to me, it completely makes no sense. Like, it genuinely does not, because there are so many issues. Obviously, the players and them being like in the portal but still on their team, that's an odd one, right? But that's the most straightforward. Then you got to remember coaches. These coaches, I believe, is the Maryland head coach that was like kind of in talks already with Villanova, and it's like still technically on Maryland, but then after the game, it's just like this whole ordeal. And so these guys are now potentially recruiting for another college while still trying to maintain integrity of their current season and their push for a title or a Sweet 16 or an Elite 8. And then you question, like, well, what do they really, if they're not winning the big one, does it really matter? I obviously it does matter on their resume and stuff, but it's a weird, dicey situation of who cleared this. And I would really like to hear what the other side is, what the what is the positive to this? Is it just that it's trying to cut down on transfer portal activity? Because, I mean, it just seems like it'd be impossible for these coaches, even if you are sticking around, to be recruiting in the transfer portal before the guy commits to a college that is no longer playing while you're still playing in the tournament. It just feels very, who cleared it? That's my main question.
Yeah, Kevin Willard, now going to be the head coach of Villanova. He moves on, and when they were leaving to go to, I believe, the Sweet 16, I don't know if you saw this video, but fans were actually booing the coach as he was leaving.
You know what? I don't even blame him.
But you take your team to the Sweet 16. You're in the middle of trying to get to this ultimate goal, and you're talking about going to a different program. Now, obviously, there's no transfer portal for head coaches. This is not what we're getting at.
No.
I like the way that you point at it, that it does have an impact because you're now going to be recruiting for a different school. I think we saw it firsthand in the Big 12 with West Virginia's coach who went for Indiana. You know dang well that he wasn't recruiting the way that you'd think that West Virginia would need to recruit heading into this next season. I think they're going to take a big dip for that heading in. Might be a good thing for Iowa State and Kansas State. Maybe they won't be at the bottom, at least in the eyes of Kansas State. They won't be at the bottom like they were this past year. When you're talking about, there's something that I noticed that you just said, when you're talking about, I want to kind of see, like, be a fly on the wall with you. I think you might get an idea here. Bruce Pearl, the head coach of Auburn, is on a committee. I can't remember what the committee was called, but I was listening to him on a press conference just a few days ago. It was one of the either pregame or postgame conversations during this tournament. I can't remember exactly when. Sweet 16, Elite 8, whatever the case. Auburn did just make it to the Final Four this past weekend. But he was talking about how he is a part of the committee that does have a say on when the portal is happening. And this is where I am like, okay, maybe I can understand why you're getting to this. The reason that they decided to put it at this date, according to Bruce Pearl, is that they wanted to make sure that these college players could get on with their lives as fast as possible. And what he related to is he said, hey, look, there's 360 odd teams in Division I basketball. As of right now, there's only 16 teams battling for the ultimate prize. So you're talking 340 plus other schools trying to find out what they're going to do with the rest of their lives if they're entering the portal. I mean, I believe on the first day of the portal this year, it was like 1,100 people entered the portal. Finding a way to do that maybe a week ahead, obviously you have to worry about enrolling, getting to school, all that case. They figured it was much more cost benefit for the player for that to happen. And although it's an inconvenience for the 16 teams that are still in the race, they found that to be a fair trade-off. What do you think about that?
I don't necessarily. It is. It does. It's because it's hard. These are still student athletes. At the end of the day, you got to go to a whole. I mean, we talk all the time about like free agency. Are they going to leave? Are they not? Like, people don't consider the moving. You have to move, and so if you transfer from UCLA to Rutgers, you're moving across the country, and then you got to get into classes at 8 a.m. on Tuesday or whatever the case might be, and you got to figure out your new transcript and all that. So I guess I could see that angle, but also at the end of the day, like, this whole thing is just so out of whack. I don't know if that's the right answer. Still, I don't think that's black or white for me. I still think we're on the black end of a white, kind of black to white scale.
That's the most Michael Jackson lyrics I think I've ever heard you say. It doesn't matter if you're black or white. I love it. Let me say this, though. Let's play devil's advocate for one more time here. The only player that we've talked about that has entered the portal with a team still in it in this basketball season is that Michigan player. And so we're saying out of all the players, the 1,100 players that entered the portal on day one, it's probably up to like close to 2,000, I'd assume now. I don't know the exact number. I'm sure you can get that off on 3 or something like that. I'm sure there's a stat somewhere on Twitter or the Google machine. But we are talking about one person that entered the portal while they're still in the tournament. And yet there's an uprise about the portal needs to be shifted to the right until either the Final Four or when the entire tournament is over. Should we be this upset about one player, 1 out of 1,100, or is this seriously an actual concern?
You just love playing devil's advocate, too.
I love it. I love it.
I love it. I love
My
it.
favorite
And
thing to do.
you know what? I'll go the other side. I'll come right back at you. I think it's more about the principle. Okay. And at the end of the day,
point.
it's not so much about this year. There was one guy out of the 16, and we can pull up all the numbers and analytics we want. If Iowa State was in that, the Sweet 16, which unfortunately they fell short, you're looking at trying to recruit players into a class that, I mean, to be quite frank, Iowa State is losing a lot to graduation, and now the portal with Dishon Jackson entering in both of their guards. And when you're in the Sweet 16 now, you might not have guys entering right away, right? Dishon Jackson enters. Does he do it right away? We don't know. We don't have the answer to that question. But nonetheless, Iowa State needs to make moves in the portal to be better for next season, to be better at that guard position. And so they have to be making those moves when they're still in the tournament, in theory, right? So I think it's more about the principle. Iowa State did not advance to the Sweet 16 this year. The numbers as they are, what they are that's fine. But next year, maybe it's 8 teams out of the Sweet 16 that are graduating their full starting 5, and they have a ton of freshmen. I just make up any case scenario you want. You can find yourself with numbers all left and right. I think it's about the principle at the end of the day.
Iowa State has what, as of right now, 4, 5 players leaving in the portal?
I want to say 5 right now.
Let's just say they get that win over Ole Miss. Let's say that happens and they make it to the Sweet 16. Now they're in the fact where this portal is actually affecting Iowa State. Let's say one of those players leaves the portal, even if it's a player that's not a player that's a contributing factor on this team, but it's still one Iowa State player hitting the portal while they're still active. Does your thought process change at all? Are you even more mad about the fact that the portal's open?
I think so. Yeah. It's like, why are we now? What? Because now, and if you want to play the Iowa State card with this year, you're already looking at a potential distraction with Keyshawn Gilbert. Then you've got, I'm not going to use any players' names because I'm not trying to take any shots here, but player A also in the portal. And now we've got what's going on with this whole thing. And then you're trying to get into the Elite 8, with this Sweet 16 win. And it's too much noise. I don't like it. I think that I would still be on the side of, let's just do this later. I don't like, what are we doing here?
We got to get to an ad break, but one more thing before we do so, because I think this is such an interesting topic, and I'm sure it's not going to be the last time we discuss about anything with portal issues. The portal is still ever growing. It's not going away anytime soon, if ever. And we are always learning something new every time we jump into it, whether it's the spring or whatever type of window we are in. This also affects how coaches can build their next team. We've talked about with coaches moving on. But players and teams that are still in the tournament, should they focus on bringing in new players? Like, for example, Michigan State's coach Tom Izzo came out with some brilliant comments before the game against Auburn just a few days ago. And he was asked about the transfer portal, how he felt about, what's going on with Kansas State. Now, Michigan State has some players they're going to have to replace this next season. That's just the way that Tom Izzo builds his teams. He said, quote, "I'm going to worry about today about the guys I got in this program, and that's it. If it costs me later, so be it." I absolutely love that from Tom Izzo, and that is a totally Tom Izzo quote. I feel like if I would have gave you that quote and then asked you who it was, I feel like Tom Izzo probably would have been the guest there. But
yeah.
I don't blame Izzo whatsoever for giving that kind of comment. But you have to think, if you're one of those 16 teams, and in this case, it's all chalk, but imagine if you're a Cinderella team and you're trying to make a run into the national championship, and you find a way to get there, and then the portal happens. Now you have to try to rebuild again. I think that's where it would hurt the most. Maybe that's why it's not a big deal right now, because we're all chalk.
And the other side of that too is the Cinderella, those guys that are on the Cinderella team. Remember, like a Doug Eater from St. Peter's, those guys immediately cleared house because they made the exposure to move on. If that Cinderella team has to wait a few extra weeks, because of this whole game we're playing, not that the portals move back, that they stay with the team till they're eliminated. Then they're like, oh, well, all those positions are filled. Like now we're going back to, I don't like it. But I do, obviously, Tom Izzo, wonderful head coach, one of the best in the game. I get what he's saying, but also I just don't think that's the way you can go about the game right now.
On the other side of this, I'm going to ask the question, what's the right answer? Is there a clear-cut one? And then we got to dig into some other issues that are being addressed in the world of college athletics right here on this special Locked On crossover edition of Locked On Kansas State and Locked On Cyclones. This special Locked On crossover edition is sponsored by FanDuel. March Madness is here, and FanDuel is giving you a chance to get on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's 200 extra bucks to bet on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories. If there was actually a Cinderella story, Nick, not this time, all chalk. And even who's cutting down the nets. According to our friends at FanDuel, heading into the Final Four, Nick, Florida is a 2.5-point favorite over the Auburn Tigers. How you feeling about that one?
Give me the Gators, baby.
Okay, all right. And then the Big 12, only Big 12 team left, the Houston Cougars are a 4.5-point underdog to Cooper Flag and those Duke Blue Devils. You feeling that the Big 12 can represent in the Natty Championship?
You're giving me 4.5 points for Houston? Psh, I'll take it.
Yeah, I'm with you as well. So check out FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoops action. Again, $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet hits. That's FanDuel. Check it out today. Thanks for making this Locked On crossover your first listen today. For your second listen, check out Locked On College Basketball. Isaac Shade, Andy Patton has you covered. March Madness is here. You're already down to the Final Four. Be the most informed college basketball fan and listener out there. Check it out anywhere you listen to your favorite podcast and on YouTube. Nick Maravitz from Locked On Cyclones joining me for this crossover today. I'm Christian Rao from Locked On Kansas State. We just talked about the transfer portal. What's going on with that? It's an interesting subject that's never going away in the world of college athletics. It's not going away anytime soon. It's growing. It's changing. It's evolving. Thesaurus here, Nick. What's another word for that? There's a lot of different things.
There's a lot of them
that can happen. To clear this up and to wrap up this topic here, because I know we went super long on that last segment, but what's the right answer? Is there a clear-cut one to making the transfer portal window a specific time to benefit all programs, whether they're playing in the March Madness tournament or not?
I think if I had the answer, I'd be getting a really big paycheck. And that's why it is so difficult, right? I don't know if there is one singular answer. To me, it feels maybe, and this is maybe just me being a little bit naive, but it feels like the college football playoff, right? The answer was 12. Well, now we're going to 14, and then we'll go to 16, then we'll go to 20. Like, there is never really an end point. I don't know if there's ever a point where the portal is going to make complete sense for every single situation. The goal is really just to have it benefit as many people as possible. And while I do think right now there are a lot of problems, I think that, the comment about making it for the athletes, I can see where they're going with that. I can definitely understand that, but there's got to be a better resolution than this. I mean, come on.
I'm with you. No, I think that's the case. I'm with you as well. I do think, like college football, I think it's the same for basketball. I'm not sure. Don't quote me. But once your team was eliminated, you had an extra couple days to enter the portal because the portal was closed once the national championship happened. So you had 10 days to enter the portal. But some of those opportunities might be gone.
They're full. Yeah, they're filled up. That's the problem.
And that's why you can't make that the only thing to go on. Like, hey, congratulations, you made the national championship. I know you're a freshman looking for playing time, and you're probably going to be stuck the next year as well. You battled for that spot. It didn't work out, but the portal's closed. You're going to have to figure that out in the next cycle. So that's something that needs to change. I do think that there are some tweaks that need to happen. And again, this is a process. We are only in the 4th year of this. There's a lot to happen, a lot to change as well. Speaking of other issues that are being addressed in the world of college athletics, this one ties right into the portal and why the portal has been so enticing. And that's NIL, with name, image, and likeness. And there's a new NIL law that has been targeted by the state of Nebraska, trying to amend it, and it's getting targeted with the House versus NCAA settlement terms. That stuff is coming into fruition here in the next week. There's a final approval, a hearing for a final approval set for April 7th on Capitol Hill. And just a few days later, the NCAA head president, Charlie Baker, and a couple other players and people and big names, if you will, are going to continue to lobby to help the congressional level in this landscape and leaders heading back to Capitol Hill just a few days later for what they're calling college sports day. The biggest thing here with this whole lawsuit is that college athletics as schools are going to limit the NIL to $20.5 million directly to their athletes. It's going to be back at the program university level. And there's going to be some other things that change in here, meaning like disclosing NIL accounts, not letting certain NIL deals happen in certain states. I think Oregon's trying to push out a bill that's not allowing like tobacco, alcohol, and gambling being in NIL. There's a lot of extra rules here. What do you think about this as an initial thought process? Do you think it's a good idea to give a general landscape of this, or is this asking for trouble?
It feels like it on paper, it's like this makes complete sense. Let's do this. And then you just know that there was some comments already about like this is going to result in back to under the table. There's going to be a certain amount that's disclosed, and then the rest is going to be under the table. And so as much as the wild west, I don't think is like, this is what we just talked about in the whole first segment, right? Like we don't know what it is. Unfortunately, we don't have the right answer right now. I don't know where to go. I just know that where we're at right now isn't right. And that's the same thing here. I don't think just letting everything go completely, however, like you can't just have no regulations at all. But as soon as you do start to introduce those regulations, you run the risk of under the table, of just things just happening, especially if those NIL basically undisclosure type situations go through where it's like, well, we don't have to really say what is happening here. I just it's an interesting situation. I do think in theory though that it makes sense, like everybody's kind of on this same level playing field. You can allocate the funds how you feel fit. I just don't think that's how it's going to end up actually playing out.
I'm with you. It's like, feels like it's a 2-step forward, maybe 1 step backwards approach, or maybe is it a 1 step forward, 2 steps back? What do you think?
That would be 1 step back.
Yeah. Where are we at with that? Because that's exactly where I feel here. I think it's the first part. I think it's a nice step forward.
I agree.
With a half step back. I think that there's going to be overall, it's going to be more pros than cons, but I would not suspect. I guess what I'm saying is I would not
be surprised.
Yeah, if there's thank you for that. The thesaurus finally came in. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Look at that.
I would not be surprised if we are getting some sort of cheating. Now, I don't think it's going to be like SMU levels. I don't think it's going to be like where we're getting to like certain amount of coaches being fired and we're having all these, stay clauses or whatever the case may be. I don't think that's going to happen. But I do think that there are going to be some certain investigations that happen. How do you feel about NCAA investigations as of late? That's a whole different story. But there's something to keep an eye on. So go ahead.
There's also, it's just, if you're not cheating, you're not trying, basically the old Patriots mantra. So it's always going to happen. It's always and there's always tampering, and there's always, it's just, that's how these things go. And so to put some regulations on it, I think is probably a smart move.
Well, the Big 12 probably has nothing to worry about because Texas and Oklahoma are finally not in it anymore. So probably don't have anything to worry about when it comes to cheating scandals if that happens in the near future. All right, let's wrap up this show with a fun topic. At least in my mind, I don't know if it's fun for you, but I found this as a pretty lighthearted way to end this show. Let's wrap that up right here on the special Locked On crossover edition of Locked On Kansas State and Locked On Cyclones.
The NCAA Tournament is here, and so is the Bracket Breakdown.
Locked On Podcast Network and Amazon Fire TV channels are teaming up to deliver NCAA Tournament coverage like never before. Watch studio shows featuring former players and Locked On's local experts as they guide you through every upset, buzzer beater, and bracket matchup.
Stream it all for free on Amazon Fire TV channel. Search Bracket Breakdown to see it all for free.
It's your team every day.
Christian Round, Nick Maravitz here. I couldn't even say your name right. What was that? What was
Verametz? Nick Verametz.
Maybe you need to change your Twitter account for that. Maybe change your profile picture. I don't know. But we're talking all different types of problems today with now we need to add one more, my speech, across college sports. Let's dive into a new development on a recent Big 12 gambling story. And this gambling story did happen just a few years ago. That's Hunter Dekkers. Obviously, was supposed to be the quarterback to replace Brock Purdy at Iowa State. You know this story all too much. But there's this new development coming out, and there's a really nice feature that was on ESPN just a few days ago, talking about how Hunter Dekkers is entering the NFL draft and says he's ready. Hopefully he can find a spot on a professional team. Take me through your thought process when this entire thing happened a few years ago. Obviously, it was a crazy moment in college sports. And then what you think now about him being potentially an NFL quarterback.
Yeah, this was a wild, just whirlwind of everything, right? From Brock Purdy and where the team was at, and then is it Hunter Dekkers and then this whole thing, and it was a lot. I'm not gonna lie, it kind of hit you like a bus, and so he ends up, I don't even know what ended up happening on the legal side of things, but at the end of the day, he didn't play for the Cyclones, and now it's Rocco Becht, and I think maybe all things happen for a reason because obviously Rocco is really solid now. But Hunter Dekkers goes and balls out at Iowa Western, small community college out. I think it's by like Sioux City or ish, kind of. I don't even know. It's a little bit south of that maybe, but it's a great institution. I know a lot of players that have moved on from Iowa Western to big time roles all over the country. I'm not even joking. Like it is it's like a last chance U type of deal, but it's like not last chance, like they just go there and then they I don't know what it is, but they're what's in the water, but they go on to big things. And so Hunter Dekkers goes and balls out for them, and now looking to make a run at the NFL. And it seems like John Gruden has his back, which is always a positive sign. When his name popped up, there were a lot of Cyclone fans, myself included, that were like, whoa, what? Really? Okay. All right. So I think the fan base is kind of behind him. Like, hey, look, everybody makes mistakes. It is what it is. You didn't get to play out your full career as a Cyclone, but let's see you make some noise in the NFL. I think the real debate is, do we claim him as a Cyclone in the NFL or not? I don't make that decision, luckily.
Well, he did participate in Big 12 Pro Day, and he did get a chance to throw at that. I would assume that he was there on an invite from Iowa State, just a guess, unless they just invited him because he was a JUCO and he was in that area. I mean, location-wise, it would make sense that he would be at that Pro Day, just based on Iowa, right? And I guess you could make the Big Ten argument, I guess, as well, since the Hawkeyes, your little brother, as you mentioned last time we cross over.
Yes.
Deckard made approximately 366 bets on his mother's DraftKings account, totaling almost $2,800, including, and this is what the big kicker was, a $15 bet in 2021 on Iowa State to beat Oklahoma State, a game where he was on the roster but did not play. And this is where the rule for NCAA made him permanently ineligible. And that's what came in last February. That's what sent him to JUCO. As you mentioned, he has been coached by John Gruden, who is a quarterback guru. I mean, his quarterback coaches are very well known across not just college sports and high school sports, but the NFL and everything as well. John Gruden's also made himself known again in the world of sports media, hopping back into Barstool. I'm sure everybody's seen those amazing box openings. I think that's been super cool, by the way, to see him back. I mean, he's you can tell that a guy like Gruden just loves football. Like, there's no
football guy.
There's very few people that that love football as much as John Gruden. Like, you can just tell just by knowing, watching him on TV or media. I don't know the guy, but I can tell you that guy likes football probably more than me. And I love football.
He is the S tier, the top tier of football lovers. I think everyone can agree on that.
So here's the biggest question. Does Dekkers get drafted? And if he doesn't get drafted, does he find himself on an NFL team this training camp and maybe find himself a roster spot? Could be an undrafted free agent, UDFA. I'm having a tough time speaking today. It must be just like the long weekend. I don't know what it is. But what do you think? Dekkers has an opportunity to make an NFL team?
I think so. And I don't know what the timeline for that looks like. I'm not going to lie. The quarterback situation right now in the NFL is a very interesting one, and it's kind of a fluid situation. Obviously, a lot of pieces moving there, but I do think that Dekkers has the talent, the ability to get to the NFL. I would be curious to see if it's this year, or if he ends up maybe in like a UFL situation, kind of to get some tape built up at a higher level of competition than JUCO. but I do think that with John Gruden at his back, that will help a lot. Sometimes it's who you know. And so I don't know. I do think he's got it. He could at least make the roster. I think that's very valid. But he might have to make a few of those kind of like they're not tryouts, but you know what I mean, where you go and you kind of work out for him and see one-on-one if it'd be a good fit for that program. Kind of feel like I think it was Jake Bates, right, out of the UFL that ended up kicking for Detroit. Just kind of kicked for them, and it worked out. I could see that being a situation for Deckers, and wish him all the best. A very interesting story, though. I don't think anybody can deny that, to go from basically banned from the NCAA to a real shot at making the NFL. That's one comeback right there. I'm not gonna lie.
Would it be fair to ask, or maybe too soon to ask, that should we bet $15 on it that he makes it? Or?
Oh my! Well, I'm not on any roster, so I don't know if I might be okay. But I don't know.
Okay.
I'm not giving Deckers any promo codes. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, don't let them use your mom's account either. All right. Let's wrap up this episode here. Nick, where can everyone find you here on Locked On Cyclones?
Locked On Cyclones is your team every day. Obviously, Kansas State, not probably Cyclone fans, but important to keep tabs as we head towards Farmageddon, first game of the NCAA season. Then at Nick_Marvel on Twitter for everything just in general that I'm doing.
Yep. And you can find Locked On Kansas State, same places, YouTube, everywhere you listen to podcasts. And you can find on Twitter X at Locked On K-State. All right, Nick, let's get out of here. See you back here for another episode. This was a special crossover edition of Locked On Kansas State and Locked On Cyclones.